update you on the breaking news situation in Seattle. This is Seattle Pacific University campus. There has been a shooting there near Otto Miller Hall. The Seattle Fire Department is telling CNN that they have 4 victims of the shooter right now. 2 of them fighting for their lives, a man and a woman, and then another man and a woman, our understanding is, who are in stable condition. The suspect is in custody and is alive, and a witness to the shooting says the shooter appeared agitated just before he shot one victim. So let me just bring in our guests here, Tim Clemente, former FBI agent, special focus on counterterrorism, and Lou Colombo, law enforcement agent. Good to have both of you back. Tim, so let me just ask you, you hear that the shooter appeared agitated, went up in this hall, approached 2 people, one of whom he ended up shooting in the eye. What does that give you enough information at all?
Well, it gives me a little bit of information about him. The fact that he was agitated, I mean, in a situation like this, obviously he's going in there obviously to harm people. But generally these circumstances we find, like the shooter in Santa Barbara most recently, they're what we call injustice collectors. And they're known by that from a profiling perspective, because what they do is they build up all these slights and injustices throughout their life, and they use them as ammunition in an act like this, where they feel totally justified in any act of vengeance, destruction, or death, because they've been slighted in some way. I mean, look at the Santa Barbara guy. He didn't have a girlfriend, so that justifies him to kill as many as dozens of people he was trying to kill. So these people, and Lou mentioned earlier, mental illness is obviously a factor in most of these shootings, and that clearly I think we'll find that it might have been in this case. But an individual like this coming in there agitated, I don't know if the people that he shot were his actual or intended targets, or if these were just targets of opportunity, the first people that presented. But this guy, I mean, we're going to look into his background. Obviously, he's alive, so he can be interviewed and interrogated, and I think we'll come to find that Lou is probably right about the mental illness, and then also there were some things that were done to him that he feels this is his justification to do something to other people in response.
And Lou, we're hearing now the Seattle Police Department's going to hold a media briefing soon with what they know. So obviously the second that starts, everyone, we're going to bring that to you live. But you know, we don't know if they have more information at this point. Lou, again, I'm going off of what we just are. Some of our viewers may have heard from our breaking news coverage. Our affiliate was reporting, so this is what they were saying on our air. We have not independently confirmed it, but they were talking about a shotgun. Some of the people said he had an intent to reload. What are you able to figure out from that in terms of you know, possible planning or pre-planning?
Well, I would think obviously he had planned to do this. I don't think this was something that was spontaneous. You know, the weapon he chose, which is a shotgun, is probably one of the most, if not the most lethal small arm you can be shot with. The wound channels and the wound ballistics associated with this weapon are just devastating, and it's very, very hard to survive gunshot wounds. And that, again, is contingent upon projectiles used, but as a rule, it's a very interesting weapon. The second part of this thing is whether or not he just arbitrarily chose targets. In other words, if this was, for example, some type of domestic disagreement, someone was going out with his girlfriend, he'd have a specific target. It appears as if he just arbitrarily started to shoot at people, which is why I made the statement that I believe that this is going to be associated again with mental illness.
With mental illness. And I want to bring in our Stephanie Elam, who's just starting to work her sources on this story from Los Angeles. And Stephanie, what have you been able to figure out?
Well, one thing we're trying to get clarity on here, Aaron, is just how police are trying to clear these buildings around where the shooting occurred. There was some discrepancy about whether or not there was one shooter or 2 shooters. We believe that there is one. We're still looking to confirm that. But what we do know is that they are going building by building. The SWAT team there, this is according to the official Seattle Police Department Twitter account, and they're going through and they're cleaning out these buildings and these rooms to make sure that there's nobody else in there, making sure it's completely safe and locking down this area where this shooting has happened. They want to make sure that there's not any more shootings that are going to occur, although they do believe that they have this one person in custody that they are taking down to the station, they are saying. And since he's alive, obviously there's a lot more that we could learn from this. But at this point, right now, we just know that there are those 4 victims, 2 men and 2 women, 2 with life-threatening injuries that we are looking at right now, Aaron.
Tim, how significant is it, I mean, that you've got the shooter in custody? I mean, just when it feels to so many of us that this is, I can't believe this is happening again. This is happening way too much in this country. But in every case, the shooter is killed by authorities or kills himself. In this case, the fact that the shooter is alive, How significant is that going to be just in terms of law enforcement overall, trying to understand what motivates people to do these horrible things and stop it from happening again?
Well, certainly there's a lot we can learn from this particular individual about why he did this. I mean, in the case of James Holmes in Colorado, in Aurora, he was alive at the end of it, and he did it for that 15 minutes of fame, as I think it was Lou also mentioned earlier. And sometimes that's their objective. I want to be, Columbine, Klebold and Harris wanted to be the greatest killers ever, and then I believe it was Holmes that wanted to supersede that and have the greatest record of deaths by any one individual in a mass shooting. And so some of these individuals, their mental illness leads them to wanting this notoriety. And this individual, the fact that he didn't shoot himself, may have been he was planning to do it and he wasn't completed with the task he had at hand. Maybe he had a secondary attack or a secondary assault he wanted to conduct. And/or law enforcement came in and this guy gave up, which, as you said, it is very, very rare. Suicide by cop is very common in a situation like this, and the most common thing is suicide itself, where they literally just shoot themselves at the end of the act.
Lou, I mean, obviously being killed by authorities happens so often because they're want to do anything they can to prevent these individuals from killing anybody else. So the fact that they didn't have to shoot him, what might that say about whether he had already stopped, or does that in and of itself tell you something?
Well, I can say this, that if the law enforcement officials or the campus police were able to apprehend this individual without shooting him, that speaks volumes of them, because there's always a value in taking these people alive. And as this gentleman just pointed out, we need to study these individuals. You need to continue to learn. But, I hate to be redundant about this, but there's a massive failure with our mental health system. Families that have children like this. We really don't know that much about this individual just yet. As you know, law enforcement right now is employing many of the same tactics they did with the prior shooter in Santa Barbara. They're visiting families, visiting his residence, computers, any types of communications. They're trying to create a profile or an understanding of exactly what was making him tick as best as they could. But there's always a value in law enforcement apprehending someone like this as opposed to terminating him for the purposes that we're discussing. And that's to learn. It's got to be about obtaining information.
All right, we're going to just interject here a very quick break. We continue to cover this breaking news story out of Seattle. We'll be right back.